Hello, everybody. It's the Saturday before Easter, and we're in southern Saskatchewan. And it has been very interesting. We got hit with a snowstorm that we didn't expect. It was kind of nice, actually. We need the moisture real bad. So, today, what we're going to do today is we're going to sift the castings again, re-aerate them, keep them activated so that they don't go anaerobic. And I'm doing all of the castings. So I've got 4 green buckets and this bucket here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the castings in the big tub. The overs, whatever eggs and stuff happen to show up, and what doesn't want to go through the screen is going in here, because I don't want to smear it across the screen because you'll probably end up killing baby worms. And then whatever's in the overs is going to go into a bin with just the mixed worm bunch. So I'm learning this as I go along the way. And whatever worms come out this time are going to go in here. And they should go pretty quick. I mean, this has all been through the sifter already. I'm learning along the way that in the spring of the year, after, like, I spent a lot of time pulling out all my castings that I could out of the bins that I could. And with that said, there's still stuff to do. Like, it seems like you're done, but you're not. And there's still stuff that has to be done. And maintaining the castings and keeping them in good shape is a very important part of the winter and spring program. And I'm seeing worms in here already. And as anybody that's been following me knows, in the last, I didn't really get too fussy on trying to get all the worms out of the castings as I was previously. Because we're going to, like, we're only in March here. Around this country, seeding usually doesn't start until at least the end of April. So we've got another month yet before I'm going to be making many projects outside with worm tea or anything like that. So let's just look. There's a worm, there's a worm, there's a worm, there's a worm, there's another worm, there's another worm. So we're pulling out a lot of worms this time, and that's good. There'll still be worms in the castings also. But what's happening and what's going to happen is the worms there'll be less of them, there'll be less to take out, and we'll put them in that other bin with where we want them. That's going to go to our outdoor project. And we're going to let them guys get together with their friends and maybe grow and maybe do some breeding, because there is some larger juveniles in here that are probably within another month they're going to be breeding. I've got all stages probably in here, because I know when I was doing this I had different size worms going in the buckets. And I'm sure With sifting this one time here, and then at least one more time before we make the worm tea, we're going to get a lot of these worms collected out of the and here is my worm trap. We'll check that later. Set it there for now. But we're going to have a lot. I see a lot of babies in here, and that's okay. They'll end up either in there and grow some more and then catch, but we're going to catch a lot of worms in to put into that other bin that's going to go out into the windrow. So when I have balls in there, I just crush them. I don't smear them, because if you grind them into the mesh, you're likely going to be grinding worms with it. So just push on them and they should break apart fairly easily. So I guess I'm new to this. This is my first year worm farming also, and see, there's a worm, there's a worm, there's a worm. Small worms. Worm over there. But what I'm learning is you have to maintain your castings to keep them in good shape so that they're not going anaerobic. And while you're doing that, you're going to get some of your worms out. And it's just part of the whole chore. And anybody that says, oh, worm farming is just, you throw worms in a bucket and it can be that way. But you're not going to have the control, I guess, of where your worms end up. Because if you just throw worms in a bucket and then you want to use the castings and you don't do any sifting and you don't do any of that, what you're going to find is you're going to be using up a lot of your worms in the outgoing processes of your worm farm. So you're going to lose a whole bunch out to the garden. Yeah, there's a lot of little worms. Whether they were in there when we sifted or whether they've hatched and grown, one way or another, there's a lot of worms in there. And I like that because that's going to get my bin that I want to take outside more activated for that project. And I mean, that project's not going to start first thing in the spring. First I have to build the compost pile or windrow. Then it has to heat. The temperature has to come up and it has to compost and heat. And then once the temperature starts dropping down, that's when I'm going to add the worms, so that we're not cooking the worms. So I guess what I'm trying to make, the point I'm trying to make is that process is not going to happen first thing in the spring. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of worms in every bucket. Yeah, there's a lot of worms in there. That's good. That's good. So I'm showing you this stuff along the way as I do it, to show you that it's not all just playing with the worms. Sometimes you just have to do some maintenance of your castings, or there's enough worms in this castings, what I'm seeing. By the time we're done this bucket and 3 green buckets, we're going to have enough worms out of these castings to amount to something. There, hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 or so worms, and they're small, so they don't, they say there's 1,000 worms in a pound. Of breeders, when they're babies, if you've got a pound of baby worms, you got a lot more than 1,000, and that's where your population really takes off, is when you've got all them little guys come up, and in 3 months they start breeding. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of worm. All sizes. Lots of worms. Worm. So, I'm pretty happy with that. The really neat part about this whole thing is this has all come out of 250 worms that my original purchase of worms was 250 worms, of which probably the first week I had 50 or 100 of them go walkabout because they were probably Indian blues and they weren't happy with the environment that I had provided. The red wigglers seemed to settle pretty much right in, and I didn't know I was getting Indian blues when I ordered them. So, unbeknownst to me, being a new worm guy, I was just excited to have worms, and then I started my worm bin, and the next couple days I had worms all over. I lost quite a few of my original purchase because I'm positive they were Indian blues, and Indian blues are a lot more apt to go on a walkabout situation if they don't like the surroundings. So I'm actually going to leave my castings in this big blue tub for now, because like I said, they need to be turned in, or turned once in a while to aerate. So the next time I'll just kind of do it into tubs and then transfer it back into the green buckets. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of worms in here. Like, almost already, I'd say that there's 100+ worms in these overs, and I know that there's some castings going back there, and I can always resift that again one more time, get more of the castings out and less of the worms. We have screens, we have technology. This is probably going to end up to be a fairly long video. A lot of worms hanging around down here in the bottom. And eventually I'm going to have to get them out. We'll let that dry up for a bit while we're working the rest of it. Just the air getting to it makes the castings maybe come off a little easier. So if you like what we're doing on this channel, If you like the worms, it's not just going to be a worm channel. It's going to be about doing worm tea and trying to rejuvenate the land and recording how that goes, right? I think we're going to make a massive amount of worm tea this year because we have enough castings to make a lot of it. And my land is in southern Saskatchewan here. We're in an area, it's quite sandy, quite prone to alkali. I also have some very heavy clay land that is, shall we say, topsoil deficient. It's not very good topsoil. So all that being said, what I need to do is try to improve my land. And so that's going to be part of the project. The other part of the project will be to that comes right off. Should probably come right off. So, get back to description of my land. My land is very, shall we say, it's not top quality. And the sandy part of it, through the 30s and through cultivation time, before we went to less till or seeded it back to grass and hay, has very much depleted. It eroded badly with the wind and the water, and it's not the best. Let's just say there's room for lots of improvement, and any improvement should be noticeable. So we're going to do that. We're going to try to get the windrow and the outdoor worm farm working. Because if we can do that, then yeah, I'm not seeing as many worms down here for sure. We're definitely getting a lot of worms out. And this is some exercise, shaking this around the way I do it. Everything's manual for now until I get bigger and figure out how I want to do things. I'll probably make a sifter that's a little bit more or less labor intensive in the future, but for now, this is what I've got. And it works. And it's a good way to learn. It's a good way to see what your farm is doing, your worm farm is doing. And it's a good way to make your hands are right in it all the time. So it's a good way to learn along the way of what you need to do. And truth be known, that's probably not a bad thing for worm farmers that are, learning along the way, is to keep your hands in the game, keep your head in the game. Learning along the way is the only way we're going to do it. this stuff's fairly wet, and it does stick to the screen. That's okay. You know what I might do is leave these castings and worms in here for a day or two and let this castings dry out a bit, and then resift to get the worms out. Maybe do a little feeding down the bottom to get some bait going to them so that they kind of congregate around that, and it might just work out pretty neat. I'm seeing a lot of worms as I pull castings out. And this casting bucket here, the top of it is fresh and the bottom of it is my most mature castings. And I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to put them all together because that's where they're going to end up in the end anyways. And it keeps your more mature castings reactivated with all the active biology from the most recent. Because what I'm being told, and I believe it, the older your castings get, they start to lose some of their activity, the biology. And I can believe that. Let's face it, I have a feeling that my castings that are 6 months old and been treated properly are probably better than anything you're ever going to buy in a sealed up plastic bag. But reality is that's likely a very true fact that your castings do lose some of their activity. There's a big worm. See that guy in another month? Well, actually not even another month. He has a clitellum now. He's looking for somebody to breed with. So goes to show you the different stages of worms I have in this castings. And it smells great. It smells earthy. There's no foul smell. I mean, a lot of my castings I've already managed once, I guess, as you should say, or maintained them once. So with that, they are in really good shape. There's a good sized worm. There's a good sized worm. There's some babies. There's a, like what I classify as a toddler worm there. There's a lot of worms coming out of this stuff. So as I was saying, like, subscribe, share. If you like what we're doing, hit the notification button so you get notified when we're doing new videos. Really thank everyone for coming around and watching my videos and watching our channel. We're at about, I think it's 230, no, 215 or so subscribers, and we can always use more. If you like what you're doing, what we're doing, subscribe. And I haven't figured out the YouTube algorithm thing. What I put up and think that it's going to be really interesting for people turns out to be a complete bomb sometimes. It's just the way it goes. There's a bigger worm again. Doesn't have the clitellum yet, but probably won't be long. And there's a possibility that could be a European nightcrawler also, because I have sifted some European nightcrawler, and therefore their clitellum is not quite as pronounced as the red wigglers is, but where they're going to end up, it's all going to be fine anyway. I've really enjoyed the comments along the way. This last week has been really quiet. I guess people have just been busy, and that's understandable. Traffic is less, you're going to get less comments, but the comments are great. Comments are kind of brighten a person's day when you get comments, because then you know people are interested in what you're doing, and they're feeding back, and it's pretty cool. Lately I think I have been responding to all of the comments. And if I've missed anybody, please don't think that I don't want to talk to you, because that's not at all true. Okay, there's big worm, little worm, little worm. Yeah, we're getting a good amount of worms out of this. And like I said, this I can let this dry down a little bit. Give that a quick sift before putting it into that other bin, and get some more of the castings out of it, because of course my objective here now is to get as many castings as I can to make worm tea for spring. But that being said, I still want the worms to do their thing, and they're doing very well as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I feed them scrap food from my kitchen and garden, and newspaper and coffee. There's a worm. There's a worm. There's nothing fancy about what I'm doing here, and for my new viewers that haven't maybe been with me that long, and you've probably watched some other worm videos. If you've watched mine, you've probably watched others. You'll notice I don't feed anything that resembles worm chow. That's just not, it's not in my context. It's not in anything I want to do. I have worm farm friends, I guess. I'll call them friends. I mean, we get along great whenever we talk back and forth and whatnot. They believe in worm chow, and that's fine. You know what? To each his own. But in my situation, I believe that I want my worms to do complete. Open the window up here, it's kind of warm. I want my worms to be on the regenerative scale. Let's put it in that context. So to me, buying chicken food and buying oatmeal and buying cornmeal and buying all this other stuff to grind up, put it through a blender or a grinder, and feed it to worms is not in my regenerative context. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. If you're doing worms for higher production levels, yeah, you're going to get higher production levels by feeding the more energetic foods. I mean, but look at my castings, guys. This stuff is as good as I've ever seen on any YouTube video anywhere. On all of the professionals, I'll put these castings besides anybody's, and they're just as gorgeous and just as ready to go as anybody else's. I maybe just don't get as much of it. I don't know. I get what I get. It's all new to me, and I guess the context that I'm trying to do is I want to take scrap refuse stuff from around my area, whether it be out of my house or out of my community, out of different, helping other people get rid of their waste rather than it just going down into the landfills or the I won't even mention some of the places that some of the waste goes around here, because sometimes people just dump it. And when I say dump it, I mean you see it along the road, you see it in the ditch, you see it on private land where people have come along and they just decided that the world was their oyster and they were going to just toss it. And I don't agree with that. I'm a private landowner myself, and I've seen some of the messes that some people had to go clean up in the spring before they could go out and farm their land or whatever. And I would rather concentrate on using stuff like that up. We've almost had more snow here this week than we did all winter long at any one time. And it's wet stuff. There's a lot of moisture in this stuff. So, worms. Worm. We're at the bottom of the bin. And at the bottom of the bin, there tends to be more worms. Be it because of the moisture or whatever, but there is more worms at the bottom of the bin than at the top. I mean, worms always go down, right? That's okay, because we're catching a bunch of them, and the ones that get through, we'll catch them next time. And believe it or not, we're not going to get all of them. Some of them are going to make it right through to the tea process, and after the tea process, they're going to get put into a garden bed. Worm. Yeah. Sure loosens this stuff up. Well, just like the other one, just going to set it off to the side, let it dry for a bit. Move on to the next one. Yep, worms. So, kind of go back to what I was talking about earlier about the regenerative thing and the context of what I'm trying to do and why I don't want to use worm chow. We, as humans, are really prone to doing the thing that comes the most simple or easy or efficient for us. Is it the most efficient? Maybe. Is it? I don't know. I guess my point is, I can buy the oats and the grains and the feed and feed it to the livestock and get the manure, put the manure in a compost pile, compost it, put the worms in, and I'm still feeding the worms with that grain, but I've done the other steps in front of it. And in the end, I'm using up different levels of carbon and different active agents. Like, for instance, when that grain, say, goes through a pig, because I have pigs. So if I take that grain, feed it to a pig, and then I take the pig manure after it's settled and been around for a while and put it in a compost pile and let it heat and mix it with a other bunch of stuff like wood shavings or cardboard or whatever, and let that heat and let it cook. And then when it cools down, I put worms in there, and I'm feeding my worms a completely different level of biology in. And worms, 9 times out of 10, worms are eating the microbes and the biology. They're not actually eating the garbage or the waste food, as some call it garbage. It's never garbage. But they're not actually eating the carrot or the onion or the potato or the watermelon or the pumpkin. They're eating the biology that transforms and feeds on that first, the microbes that transform and feed on that first, to break it down so the worms can use it. So in my line of thought, I'm adding a lot better product into this. Stuff is really wet. Some of this worm castings that I've done was just borderline to being able to do it when I did it. And of course, putting that into a plastic container with just air holes in it doesn't dry out much. So some of it's quite wet, but that's okay. It'll go in there, it'll dry out. We'll work our way through it. Like I said, all a new experience to me. I'm learning along the way. So I've been thinking about doing classes locally, kind of like what one of the guys does, AJ's Greens, does in his area. He teaches at the Y. Well, we don't have a YMCA here, but I was just thinking about putting a notice up and seeing if anybody wanted to learn about worms. Maybe just doing a class. I'm part of a group, a regenerative group here that likes to sponsor events and stuff like that. So there is some help available to maybe put something on. And maybe put that with something else. There's other aspects of regenerative farming and agriculture that could probably go along with it. Yeah. bucket's really wet down below. But with that said, there's a lot of worms down there. And I'm going, right now I'm going from the most mature, oldest sifted castings. These first buckets are the ones that I did first. So they've had the most time to settle. It is going, I guess I'm getting a lot more lumps than I expected I would, and I'm probably going to have to start doing smaller batches because it's getting so wet. But with that said, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. Get through it. We got 2 more buckets after this, and I'm just sharing what I do along the way in my worm farm. Keep everybody updated and show them that it's not just, I mean, I guess you can just feed worms and, you know, stuff like that, but I think if you got any kind of project you're trying to do, and I got some fairly aggressive projects that I'm trying to do, you really have to try to up your game a little. And by that I mean you have to try to get more production, and you want to keep your worms. You don't want to just you know, lose them. There's lots of worms that are coming back. See the chunks I'm getting? That's because it's high moisture. We're just gonna break up some chunks. There's a worm. That guy may not be a breeder yet, but isn't very far from it. And this might be one of them spots where my learning curve is really I'm on a pretty sharp learning curve when it comes to all this. The moisture has been an issue for me to get my castings out of my bins, out of my worm bins. And now I'm dealing with it again. I never thought I would get this much overs out of what I've done so far. I may end up having to use another gray tray. But if I do, I do. That's okay. But I'm going to let this stuff, I am going to do that. I'm going to let this stuff dry down. Maybe throw a piece of banana in the bottom to bait the worms down or towards it. And then in a week or so, re-sift it and give you an update as to what's going on, because I'm getting a lot of wet. There's absolutely nothing wrong with what's going on. No harm, no foul. It just makes more work. And we're learning. We are learning. So back when I made these storage bins, I left one corner that didn't have holes in it to pour stuff out of. So I didn't make as much of a mess. I don't even need to put that in there. So what else do you guys want to talk about? I just want to make a little bit of a claim or a disclaimer as along the way people contact us and asked for advice. And I will advise you, but please take it for what it's worth. I'm still learning a lot too. So any advice I've got to give is only, I guess, from the short term of experience I have. And it might sound as though I know exactly what I'm doing. But I'm still learning lots. And this bottom of this bucket is a lot wetter than I like. But the reason I'm beating on the bucket to try to loosen it up rather than stick my hand in there and loosen it up is every time I do that, I just pack it deeper. Let me see if I can find something else. Got a stick. Oh my god, the high technology stuff that I use. I have a stick. Now you could damage some worms with a stick. I'm not saying you can't, but sometime along the way we're going to do some damage to them anyways. We're not going to save them all. And it'll be okay. This stuff is really muddy, so I'm not even going to crush these balls. I don't see the point. We're just gonna, and there's a lot of worms in them. There's a worm, there's a worm, there's a worm, there's a worm, there's a worm. Very wet. like muddy wet. Yeah. Okay. Here's my line of thought. Is what I need to do is maybe the bottoms of these, they're so wet. Maybe I need to deal with them differently. It's come to the spot where it's just mud balls and non-productive, and you're not gaining. We're not getting anything out. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these to the end, and then I'm going to put them in a bucket, and I'm going to let them air up, and so that they can dry. I'm going to bait the worms down into a corner or something, and try to work with it that way. It's too wet. Okay, I gotta switch a couple buckets here. So that is nice and fluffy, and got lots of room, and it's a big bucket, so there's lots of space for it. Just gonna take these and set them down there. Hint, hint, this is, this big blue bin is going to be a future worm bin. It's going to be a wedge. It's also going to be a different project that I'm not going to talk about right now, because that's another project. And you guys, quite honestly, probably think I'm weird enough already. So, right now, we're not going there. Alrighty. Just take my stick and stir it up a little bit, fluff it all the way. Another thing, I was very surprised when I did my count on my big bin, my guy's bin, that I was around that 2 pounds of worms. And I was surprised that I thought there would be more. Now the population is still good. There's still lots of worms in there, lots of little worms in there that are growing, and they're going to be big in a couple months. And they all went in to be part of that 2 pounds. Different people have asked me along the way, and they said, how many worms do you think you got in there? And I said, I don't know, 4, maybe 5 pounds. I was so far out. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I don't care. The simple fact is that's what it is. Hi, Nix. It is what it is. There's no use me saying I got 5 pounds in there when I only got 2. And I'm not that kind of guy. It's still not bad from where I started from. It just seemed like there was more. This one's pretty wet in the bottom too. With these hand sifters, this type of sifter, I find that if your stuff is real wet, do smaller batches, and you make just as good a time of what you're going to achieve, and it gives a better chance for the stuff to go through, and you don't plug your screen so bad. The whole wall. That would have been a mess. Oh, bad cold Loki. You gonna make her? Yeah? Maybe. Along the way, you may have noticed different colors of castings. And sometimes, what I found with my European night crawlers, and I give them coffee and I give them the same food as the red wigglers, but they seem to utilize the paper more, and when they utilize the paper, your castings seem to come out maybe a little bit more on the brown, like lighter brown side than the dark brown. After I get done with it here, it'll be all mixed through anyways, so nobody's going to even notice the difference, but because I'm mixing it all into there, and then it's all going to get mixed out again. In the greater scheme of things, it don't matter. Quite a few small worms in here. Yeah, I'm seeing lots. This stuff's way too wet. So there you go. I thought that when I got it through and out of the bin that I was really winning in moisture situation because I got it out of the bin, right? Yeah. Looks like the battle's still going. Yeah, I guess that just means we're not done yet. We still got more videos to make because I'm going to show you how this goes along the way. But this stuff's virtually mud down here too, so we'll just take what we can out. And with putting it in that bigger bin, I guess the gravity compaction, the weight from the stuff on the top going down to the stuff on the bottom, I'm hoping will be a little bit less. And let's face it, maybe I just need to hand turn it a little bit to help it stay in better condition and get down to a consistency of moisture and whatnot that I want. But I'm seeing a lot of worms in here. And look at how bad it's sticking. Now this will be a reference video to go back and check after we let the stuff dry down and work on it, because as we do, it's going to get easier to work with. Like that first stuff we did was way easier than this. But my castings, my bins were very high moisture bins. Like before Christmas, I probably should have been sifting them because the moisture was perfect. But I left them till after Christmas. And I really found out that I had left them too long. And it's been a battle. It was a battle to get the castings out. And it's been a battle all along dealing with them. Worms. So, hence the learning experience, right? Worms. And they don't have to be dry for me to use. They got to be dry for me to get through the screen so I can save my worms and use them somewhere else. Because there's a lot of worms in there that I want to use. And I want to use keeping my system. Like, between these two bins, if you were to count all the little worms, I'm going to be over 1,000 worms. Like, the amount of worms I've seen is definitely going to amount to a good number. There's a lot of worms that come through your siftings with your castings. And if you just throw them away, you're going to take longer to build up. Stick was a good idea rather than my hand. It is very wet. It helps break it up better than my hand, because when my hand goes in, it just does a big wad. So we learn sticks and wire brushes for sifting are handy. Try not to smear your worms with your wire brush. There's always some that are going to be connected to the screen. Could I use this stuff, because this wet stuff, because to do what I want to do? Of course I could. Will I eventually just come to a point and use it? Of course I will. I'm not there yet. We're not to spring, and I don't need to. Use this stuff first. Even if we were in spring, I could let this dry while we're using this stuff. There's more than enough in that bucket to get me going. Because, okay, let me explain some more of what I'm going to do at the farm. As I make my worm tea, I've got a 1,000-gallon field sprayer that I'm modifying to get this stuff out onto the land. So if I'm going to be making my worm tea in totes, like the 250-gallon totes, the 1,000-liter totes. One of those totes, if I dilute my worm tea down to 5:1. One of those totes does 110 acres. No, 55 acres. If I dilute my worm tea down to 10:1 with water, one of those totes does 110 acres. One of these green buckets, when they're full, will make 2.5 totes of tea. Still seeing lots of cocoons in here, that's fine. So I'm going to be picking spots in my farm, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to do some at 5:1, and I'm going to do some at 10:1, and I'm going to do some of it at once in a year, and I'm going to do some of it twice, and I'm going to do some of it 3 times, all at the different rates. We're also, between myself and my guy that rents my farmable land, not my grazing land, we're talking about using some worm tea as a seed inoculant, to inoculate the seed so that the microbes are on the seed when they go in the ground. Pretty exciting stuff for a farmer and a worm guy, and I don't know, I just like I like stuff like this, but if we can show the results along the way, there's going to be some documentation going on, right? So documentation means a lot, because when all of your neighbors and everybody else in the world thinks that you've lost your coconut, and you can come back and show them the results in field-sized trials, side by side, field-sized trials. I guess the onus is really up to them then on whether they want to believe in what you're doing, or be interested, or show interest, or just look the other way and continue on the commercial fertilizer and chemical side of things the way they've been going. And like, I guess it matters. I care, but it doesn't matter to me which way they choose, because as long as it's happening on my ground, I'm going to be pretty happy about it. Man, I'm seeing a lot of worms in here. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let this stuff dry out in those gray bins. Alright, one more tub. This one's, well, one more tub and one more half of a wet one. A really wet one. So, I guess if you get the gist of what I'm trying to do, we're going to do some fairly good experimentation on the land. I'm going to do it on my grazing land, my haying land, which I really don't hay anymore. I pretty much graze everything. But, and there's going to be side-by-side plots. And when I say plots, I don't mean those little plots that you barely change your mind in. I mean 30 acres. And then go over and then do 30 acres of control. And then go over and do, like, it'll be 30 acres of mixed 5-to-1 once. 30 acres of mixed 10-to-1 once. A control in between next, and then we're going to do 30 acres of mixed 5-to-1 2 times, and then 30 acres of mixed 5-to-1 2 times, or 10-to-1 2 times in the year, throughout the year. So we're going to try to keep track of things and observe the differences. Wow, this bucket's way different. This, I guess, was one of the first buckets that I did too. It's all good. It just disappears when it's in the right condition. It just goes right through the screen almost. So that's just a learning curve, right? Now we know we need to. We definitely need to not forget about our castings when we put them into, take them out of the bin and put them into storage, because if they're too wet, they will just go completely into mud. And the weight from the top will compact the bottom as the moisture goes down, because the natural path of moisture is gravity. This stuff's in really good shape. I can really load the seal up. Still finding lots of good worms in there. So, yeah, I don't regret this learning experience at all. Been I guess this was the very first bucket I did. So when I said I did the first stuff that I did first and graduated on to the next stuff, I started that way, kind of. But man, this stuff is just going through like wildfire. And there's a way less of it staying in the screen, right? Because most of it's going through the screen. If I had to say, I'd say this stuff here is the perfect condition. And that's my oldest castings. And I sorted and I sorted and I sorted and I sorted to get the worms out of them. Some of them I even like. So we are going to find a few less worms in this bottom of this bucket, but there'll still be worms there. All right, so look at, see, that's all that I'm putting back in. Quite a difference. So I'm just using the stick to break it up before I try to put it on the screen, because it just kind of saves on those big landslide type of drops. No biggie. Oh, so this has turned out to be a long video, but I guess you can't say I'm trying to hide anything because you're getting the full deal on all of what I do because I show you as I go. I'm not trying to buffer it. Hi, Nix. Coming to help. So anybody that doesn't know Nix, she's a weird little dog. Not that little, she's a freaking tank. But she's very, likes to tell me how to do things in her own way. And, but doesn't come, she's not my sucky dog. She's Mom's sucky dog, not mine. This stuff here has been through the screen already. As I was landing. So, yeah, we're right back to a whole bunch of stuff to do with these castings to dry them down, but that's all right. Set these over here for now. So depth perception is probably kind of tough when you're looking square down, but there's quite a little mountain there, and you know, it's pretty nice stuff. So we're gonna go through the worm trap. Quick, and I haven't done much with this worm trap because the way I've been doing my castings, I just didn't see the point. But there's worms in it. Quite a few, actually. I'm just going to send this through the sieve. And just doing that. And I know I'm dropping worms in there. Doesn't matter, no. I'm back in the worm trap for now, or as many as I can get in there. So, all right, so like, subscribe, share, comment. I'm going to end this one here. This I'm going to store with the lid cracked so that it has some air. Those I'm going to just cover with, probably just with newspaper. Those two gray bins, and just let them sit. I didn't go back and do that. I guess I didn't go back and do that muddy one. I'll deal with that. Maybe make another video. I'm going to just drop her here for now. I'll let you guys go. This one's been long enough. Have a great day. Happy Easter, everyone.